with MU Extension. We're really, really happy to have you all here. We can tell that the seasons are changing. We are getting questions that are starting to come in from all of you, and you're itching to get outside just like we as horticulture specialists want to get outside and start playing in the soil and messing with all of our plants. I can see it, I can feel it. It just feels so great to be outside and have the sun around us. We have, as I said, a bunch of questions that have come in. We're happy to answer those questions for you. We're really excited about the growing season, and we're going to try to answer all those for you. If we don't get to them, we will definitely try to reach out to you and answer as best as we can, or we'll definitely do it the following week. So here on the screen is the map of Missouri and all the counties, and all of us who are considered as horticulturalists working with University of Missouri Extension. Some of us are happy to answer questions from other locations, because you'll notice that there are some open positions at this point, and we're hoping to get some of those interviewed and rehired. But if you're in a county where there's no one located, don't fret, just get a hold of one of us and we're happy to help answer those questions for you. And so today, as always, we like to start out with doing the weather report. And so I'm going to go ahead right now. I'm going to turn it over to Pat Guinan, and he's going to get us jump started. And Pat, I'm excited to hear what we've got going on weather-wise.
Sounds good. And thank you, Debbie. Good afternoon, everyone. Of course, me being a climate guy, I always like to look back to see what we went through here in Missouri when it comes to the weather and the patterns. And, meteorological winter is behind us. That's December, January, and February. And so a little perspective here in the upper left, these are 128 winters going all the way back to 1895 and then up to the most just this past winter. And you could see a warmer than average winter. It's kind of interesting. On the lower left, I put the departure from normal temperatures since December of 2020 up through the latest of last month, because the season kind of hides what really happened this past winter. It was December that essentially dictated this winter being above average, because January and February were actually below average. We had what I call weather whiplash. It was a roller coaster pattern that's continued into the month of March. Up and down temperatures in January and February, and so far in March. But nonetheless, this exceptional warmth we had in December, more than 10 degrees above average, led to an above normal winter. And that has been the trend over the past few decades, going all the way back to the early 1990s. 4 out of the past 5 warmest winters have occurred since the early 90s. So it follows the trend, even though only 1 month was above average back in December for this past winter. Precipitation wise, it's been somewhat of a wet one. Here is 2020, the winter of 2021-22, average a little slightly above average. That has been the trend as well. Our winters have been warmer and they've been wetter over the past few decades. Lower right shows departure from normal. Actually, with the exception of this past month being a slightly above average, November, December, and January were below average. And we had a very wet October, which was nice because we do still have some dry conditions across Missouri, despite the winter being above average overall. This is a map for the month of February for precipitation, averaging above average. And that has actually been the trend for December, January, and February. The southeastern half of the state, we've seen wetter conditions, drier conditions as you go north and westward through Missouri. Some very dry conditions, in fact, across northwestern Missouri. They could stand to use some more precipitation because of these drier conditions. And on the right, this is the drought monitor map from last week. The new one will be coming out tomorrow, but it does show those abnormally dry conditions impacting the northwestern half of the state. The rest of the state, we're doing fine in regard to precipitation and water resources and availability. Currently, we're looking at some very mild weather. As Debbie mentioned, some really nice weather yesterday, and then today and tomorrow are just going to be outright beautiful. This is a snapshot from the mesonet in the upper left, showing conditions from about 10 to 15 minutes ago. These are high temperatures we generally would see in the middle part of April. So we're easily running 10 degrees above average. By the end of the day, we'll be more than 20 degrees above average with highs reaching in the 70s. But throughout the state, we're basking in the 60s just as of just before noon today. The soil temperatures are rebounding accordingly as well, running above average, generally in the upper 40s to even some lower 50s across the state. So some very mild soil temperatures. Lower left shows the forecast for today and tomorrow and on into Friday. The pick days for this week will be today and tomorrow with unusually warm weather. Highs in the middle 70s. That's about 20 degrees above average on a breezy southerly wind, bringing that warmer air, as well as some more moisture into the atmosphere, because by Friday, we are going to have a cold front moving through the state that will bring some widespread showers and thunderstorms. That's going to be our best chances of significant rainfall as we go through the weekend. Anywhere from 3/4 to an inch of rain is anticipated across the state, so that's welcome news for Northwest Missouri. The forecast high temperatures on Saturday as we go into the weekend, it looks like more near seasonable, slightly above average, generally in the mid to upper 50s. Could be a cool morning Saturday morning, some freezing temperatures anticipated, so perhaps some frost across parts of Missouri on Saturday morning and even into Sunday morning. These are the low temperatures here in the lower right. Perhaps northern Missouri could see some light frost across that part of the state, both for Saturday and Sunday morning. Warmer conditions, though, on Sunday, again, rebounding to much milder conditions, more typical of April, with highs generally in the mid 60s across northern Missouri and reaching into the lower 70s. So it does look like a very nice weekend shaping up, with most of this precipitation that is forecast to expected to occur Thursday night and through much of the day on Friday. In regard to the amount of precipitation, this is a forecast of the forecasted amount of precipitation through Saturday morning. Again, most of this will fall Thursday night into Friday, and you can see some healthy precipitation, generally a half inch to an inch. Unfortunately, it does look like the northwestern tip of the state is going to miss out on that heavier precip, but nonetheless, some areas of northwest Missouri could see 3/4 to over an inch, and that is for much of the rest of the state as well, except far southeastern Missouri, a little lighter amounts. But overall, some significant rainfall is anticipated Thursday night and on into Friday. This is the forecast for next week. So these mild conditions the next few days, a little bit colder weather on Friday. I do want to note, don't be surprised across northern Missouri, perhaps especially northwest Missouri, you might see a little bit of snowflakes with that. I don't think it's going to amount to anything, but there are going to be some cool temperatures on Friday, especially across northern and northwestern parts of the state. Nonetheless, next week, they are calling for warmer conditions above average temperatures. That'll take us from March 21st through the 25th. I will note the first day of spring is this Sunday at about 10:30 in the morning. That is officially our first day of astronomical spring here in the country. And on the right, this is the precipitation outlook, above average precipitation. So it does look like more of a warmer and wetter pattern establishing itself for next week. The next chances of precipitation are anticipated late in the day, Monday night and on into Tuesday. And so lastly, I do want to mention April is right around the corner. That generally is the time of year when Missourians experience their last spring freeze. The Missouri Integrated Pest Management Program, in collaboration with the Missouri Climate Center, we've established a frost freeze probabilities guide. Here's the website here at the bottom. All sorts of maps and tables of when to anticipate your last spring freeze at various temperature thresholds. I just put an example here of a map, but please feel free to check out the website to get the latest information in regard to the averages when we expect median dates of our last spring freeze. But we also have fall or autumn information that as part of this guide. So Debbie, that's pretty much a weather report. I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We always appreciate you being here, Pat. There's lots of great information and great resources that we can always tap into between each garden hour to the next. So thank you very much. Tamara is our guru when it comes to the chat box. She always puts lots of great information and resources there. And by all means, feel free to click on those links and bookmark those if you want. You can also save the chat to your own computer if you decide you want to do that. And I believe if you look at the chat box and you have it open, you should be able to save that chat. There should be where it says to and it says everyone. If you continue to the right, it looks like a little piece of paper. And then I have a little smiley face and 3 dots. Click on those 3 dots. And at the top, there will be, open up another small window on the right bottom, at least on my screen. And you can click at the very top. It says save chat, and it will save to your computer. So you can always go back and get those resource links that Tamara puts into the chat box. And then Kathy has changed her name to Ask Questions Here. So if by chance someone has a question and they thought of something and they would like an answer, we may or may not be able to answer it live, but go ahead and put that to Ask Questions Here. Kathy will get that question. She will try to answer it with you either direct right that moment if she's got the answer at the top of her head. If not, when we're done, we'll know what those questions are. If you put your email address, and again, that email address will only go to Kathy, so it'll be kept private, but she will then contact us afterwards, those of us that are part of the core team here, and ask if someone can get back in touch with you to answer that question. So feel free to ask those questions. And then if you want, go back to the registration page, and it'll look like you're re-registering. But that's where you can put in your question if you would like for us to answer your question live as we're doing the garden hour. Don't fret, you can go out there as many times as you want, and you're only going to get one email reminder. You're not going to be in the system multiple times. It's just one time because it goes by your email address. And then the question will come to us, and we'll know that either yesterday morning or the morning of, and try to answer that question for you live with a short little presentation. So that's how we kind of manage everything. I do want to say thank you to Dr. Mandy Bish. She is now in charge of the Integrated Pest Management Program on campus. And so she is grateful for the work that we've done and has asked us to continue to do this. So we're thankful to her, and I want to give her a nod. What I'd like to do is go ahead and turn this over to Jennifer Shooter, and she's going to be our moderator for the rest of this hour for us. So Jennifer, take us away.
Thank you, Debbie, and good afternoon, everyone, from Kirksville, Missouri, where it is a nice, sunny, warm day today in what is known as Missouri's icebox. So glad to see the sun shining and have some warmer weather. So to start us out, we have a question about insects and leaving leaf litter in your garden. And the question reads, this year, I left my leaf litter on my garden beds as insect protection for pollinators and birds. When can I remove this leaf litter and clean up my beds? And Tamara, would you please answer that for us?
Oh, of course. So anytime I get to talk about insects, I'm excited. So yeah, we're talking about protecting overwintering insects, and when do you pull out or pull back those leaves? So this last fall we talked about leaving the leaves, and if I am grateful for the person who sent this question in, because that means that they did it. Thank you. There are so many benefits. Keeping those fallen leaves, they benefit the environment in so many ways. They benefit wildlife, including turtles, toads, birds, and especially many of our beneficial insects. Many insects lay eggs on leaves, and then there's also caterpillars and chrysalises that tuck themselves in under the leaves for their cold winter's nap. Many bumblebees rely on leaf litter for protection from the temperature and weather extremes that occur throughout the winter as they burrow only really about an inch or two under the soil. And that's where they diapause through the winter. So now that it's starting to warm up, we're getting anxious to see the new growth, to see our perennials, and also to see those insects busy on the flowers and things that are growing. So what do we do with all those leaves? Well, right now, leave them there. It is getting a little bit warmer, but we still do have some cold weather ahead. So wait as long as possible to reduce the chance of damage to your plants as well as those insects. We could have a late frost, we could have a freeze still. So we need to be aware of that. When we're talking about moving the leaves back, it's as much for the benefit of our plants and our insects. So we have to balance when our plants are starting to come up and when the insects are starting to emerge and move around. Removing the mulch early can encourage plants to bloom before the danger of frost is past. On the other hand, heavy mulch left too long can cause early emergence of weak and tender growth, and that growth can be killed or permanently injured by late freezes. The same happens with our insects. If some of them are going to well, they're cold-blooded, and so they don't move a lot when it's cooler than 40 or 50 degrees, but some of them become active based on temperatures. Others become active based on degree days. Others seem to emerge as if that's what the calendar is saying. So trying to find this balance is really important. I can't give you a very specific date, but what I can give you are some generalizations. Wait until the daytime temperatures are consistently in the 40s and 50s. I kind of lean towards the 50s when there isn't any more danger of frost. Mid-April is about the time that I'm going to pull back some of those leaves from my flower beds. I won't pull them all back because they do make a nice mulch, and I do want to protect any growth coming in. But I will pull back some because I have a lot of leaves. And so I pull back some of the extra, and I just pull them to the side of my beds in case there happens to be a late frost, in which I'll spread them back over the beds. So by the end of April, first part of May, I feel comfortable pulling any extra leaves that I pulled to the edges that I'm not going to leave in the beds. I put those into the compost bin or mow over them to shred them at that point, because the insects are out and about at that point. So keep in mind that leaving the leaves is going to be different for veggie beds versus your lawn and your perennial flower beds. In vegetable gardens, we have to be careful about many overwintering pests. So it's okay to clean those up a bit more in your vegetable garden, because we don't want to have our pests that are there that can reside from year to year. But in our other beds, then definitely please leave them a little bit longer. Another question I always get is it better to leave whole leaves or shredded leaves? Shredded leaves are wonderful. They do make a nice mulch. But if you are able to leave whole leaves, do that. Because then you're not destroying the eggs or the chrysalises or things like that are on there. Also, I get questions about leaves on the lawn. There's some research that says that it's not going to necessarily hurt your lawn, but I do have to say that it can make your lawn more susceptible to disease. So if you have more leaves than flower beds or natural areas and you want to help more pollinators, I'd say consider reducing the footprint of your lawn so that you can leave more of your leaves in an undisturbed setting. Okay, so that's what I have to answer that question. But since I have the floor, I'm going to go ahead and go right into insect friend or foe. So everybody get ready. Get your thinking hats on, and you tell me if this insect in this picture is a friend or a foe. And I'm going to launch the poll right now. All right, you should be able to see it pretty soon. Looks like some of you are already putting your answers in. I'm going to give you a few more seconds to do so. All right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now I'm going to close the poll and I will share it with you guys. Okay, so it looks like many of you said that this is a foe. Friend was close behind it. And then some of you said it depends. Some of you are catching on when I do a lot of it depends. In this case, though, this is actually a friend. This is a springtail, and there are so many species of this tiny little critter. It's been said, and when there's springtails, there can be an awful lot of them in a small area. In fact, there could be between 50 to 100,000 per square meter of organic soil. They're typically found in leaf litter, soil, decaying wood, ant and termite nests, and related habitats. They are very, very small. Usually they're less than 6 millimeters long, but often they're only 1 to 2 millimeters. They have a really neat structure on them. It's called a furcula. And let me see, I can bring up another picture. This right here is the furcula. And it tucks into this other little structure that when it releases it, it flings itself into the air. So sometimes people think that they have fleas, but it's actually these springtails, also known as columbella. They can leap about 3 to 4 inches in a single motion. That's about 100 times their body length. They typically eat vegetation, decaying vegetation, fungi, bacteria, pollen, algae, lichens, insect feces. they take these and they enrich the soil by breaking these things down and releasing the nutrients. So they're actually considered to be a good indicator of soil health if you have them, which I can pretty much guarantee you do unless you're treating your soil, which they're, like I said, they're beneficial. On the other hand, if they get in your house, they can be a bit of a nuisance, but they don't spread disease. They're not really a problem. So they're just really a nuisance, but not a bad one unless you have tons of them. But I have been getting a few calls about them recently. So if they are found in your home, it means that you often have a leak or an area of high moisture. So you need to repair that leak and or reduce the humidity, and then they'll go away. You can also vacuum them up for a quick population reduction indoors. Chemical management is not necessary typically. So just another interesting tidbit. These actually may not even be an insect, depending on the entomology taxonomist you're talking to. Recent taxonomic work actually elevated Collembola to a class level. So we have class Insecta, and it looks like there's a class Collembola as well. But on the other hand, no one's going to blame you if you call them little bugs. So that's what I have for today. Back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Tamara. It's now time to start thinking about your lawn and lawn care and what tasks might need to be done at this time. And Manoj Chetri is going to give us a turf update, as well as tell us the best way to stop Bermuda grass and creeping Charlie from spreading in your lawn. And those seem to take over areas. And actually, let me read this question. Those seem to take over whatever areas I mulch or try to grow in very quickly. What's the best method for controlling spring grubs? So, Manoj, I'm going to turn it over to you to address these questions.
Can you hear me okay and see my screen?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see your screen.
Okay. But I don't know how to advance my slides here. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Manoj Chetri, a field specialist in horticulture at Gallatin, Missouri, over Northwest region. I'm going to talk about spring lawn care. We already know from the weather update here, now spring is right around the corner, and what should we think about in our yard? Okay. Oops, I again lost my slides here. Excuse me, guys. I had multiple screens and I think that's bothering me here. Sorry for that. Okay, so at this time of the year, we care about is pre-emergent. So we have seen all kinds of ad in radio, TV, newspaper about this pre-emergent crabgrass preventer, and this is the time of the year we hear about this more often than not. So most of you might already know that pre-emergent is the herbicide that will stop any new growth from the seeds, okay, just from the seeds. And timing of these herbicides is very important because the efficacy of these herbicides depends on when do you apply these or when do you put down on your yard. So in Missouri, the timing of this crabgrass preventer, it generally falls near the second week of April. And that's the general idea, but the gold standard, if you're looking for when to time, is to monitor the soil temperature at 2-inch depth. And for 3 days in a row, if we have 55°F average soil temperature, then that's the time when we need to apply crabgrass preventer. And again, you don't have the options to check or measure the soil temperature. So you go out to the MeasureNet Missouri, as we heard earlier in the weather update. This is where the resources are to look for the soil temperature. For those of you who already know what is growing degree day, I just want to put down the numbers that 200 growing degree day is the threshold, is the timing where you should apply the crabgrass preventer. Again, for those of you who do not know, I don't want to give details on that. That'll be the whole new topic to discuss. But as a general rule of thumb, again, the easy idea is to look out for when does our forsythia or eastern red bud blooms, and if so the timing that these two plants blooms gonna coincide when our soil temperature reaches an average of 55°F, and that's a give or take. I don't want to be very certain on that because there can be some kind of differences within your yard. Some of the sites on your yard can get full sunlight, and some of them can get shade. So again, just take with a pinch of salt on that. When you apply the pre-emergent, one thing you have to take care is the irrigations after applications. Okay, your pre-emergent has to get that into hydrolysis and function as what it's supposed to do. It has to get water or moisture. So irrigations or precipitation has to be there after applications. It just cannot sit there and wait to work just as that. And if you want to get like persistence, uniform control throughout, then you can also do split applications. You can separate that applications in 6 or 8 weeks time, and that will give you more uniform and persistent coverage. Now, there are several options in the market. I'm not going to go through the trade names here. I'm just going to go with my chemical names like pendimethalin, dithiopyr, and protamine. These are some of the options for pre-emergence. And so when you're shopping for any kind of pre-emergence or crabgrass preventers, you have to read the label and find these chemistries on your label. Okay. So again, these all pre-emergence, they stop weed seeds and also your turf grass seeds from emerging. But as often as I get these questions, will that stop my Bermuda grass weeds or other weeds that spreads through stolons and rhizomes? And answer is not. So they will not stop already established grass. Okay, they will only stop the emergence of new seedlings. So for those like those type of weeds which spreads through stolons and rhizomes, so how do we stop that? So there you have to apply post-emergent herbicides. So those herbicides will work once the grass is established, and they take up down to the roots and kill the grass or weeds. And another weeds I want to point out here is the goose grass. The pictures on the right affected by the goose grass. And this looks pretty similar with the crabgrass. I'm not going to go details on how to ID the weeds here, but this goose grass looks like somebody stepped on the crown of the weeds and looks, there's a white spots in the dead center of that weed. So goose grass is different from crabgrass, and it emerges actually 3 or 4 weeks later than the crabgrass. So if you are concerned about goose grass in your yard, then you have to split your pre-emergence. Okay, at least split them 4 to 6 weeks apart to get both your crabgrass and goose grass under control with the application of pre-emergent. And at this time of the year, we can now, the weeds are starting to come up, especially the winter annuals like henbeet, chickweed. Those are the weeds very common to see. And people may not notice that those weeds are already there, but they are growing so small and short, people do not notice. But once the temperature starts to kick in and warms up, and now they grow more vigorously and visible all over their yards. One of the most common weeds again is a henbeet, which is a winter annual. It gets killed in the summer because of the higher temperature. Another weeds very common to be confused with henbeet is purple dead nettle. This is also winter annual with purple flowers, and so can we get confused. And winter annuals, they are killed during the summer. But one of the most obnoxious weed, I would say, is the ground ivy or creeping Charlie, and we got questions for that last week. And they are first of all the perennial weeds. They live there throughout the year, so they do not get killed over winter or summer, and that's one level of difficulty with these weeds. And another is they spread by runners, the stolons above ground. So any plants that spread by runners will be very hard to control, because your pre-emergent will not be helpful here, because pre-emergent will only stop the new seedlings, but it will not stop the runners or stolons and rhizomes. So before we go to the chemical options to control those weeds, let me briefly mention about the cultural management options that we have for managing any kinds of weeds. In general, if you can grow a healthy, dense turf, then you can, most of the time, manage the weeds under a manageable level. And the first thing to focus on the cultural management is the mowing height. So if you mow your turf high, you will help the roots beneath the soil to grow more vigorously, more deeper, so that it will make the tissue or canopy of the turf more healthy and vigorous, so that it can outcompete weeds in terms of competing with water, nutrients, and sunlight. Similarly, the proper fertilization in the spring, in fall. If you are talking about warm seasons, proper fertilization in the summertime. This is very important to keep your yard healthy so that they can outcompete weeds in general. Irrigations, again, not too much of water, not too little of water, just the right amount of water. Instead of doing daily irrigations, just spacing them out 2 or 3 times a week, deep watering and infrequent watering. That's what we recommend for growing a good root systems for your yard. Shade, if you can reduce the shade from your trees, shrubs, that will be helpful for your turf canopy to harvest more sunlight and grow more vigorous turf. And these all management options will eventually help your turf fight or outcompete weeds, disease, insects, all sort of problems. But here I want to focus on the questions. The question was about how do I manage Bermuda grass or ground ivy / creeping Charlie. So there are 2 names for ground ivy, creeping Charlie or ground ivy. So how do I manage that? I mean, it keeps coming on my mulch, in my flower beds, on my yard from neighbors and everywhere. So again, the weeds with runners, they are not very effective with pre-emergent because we are not stopping that. So we have to do with post-emergence. And what we have with the post-emergent herbicides is that you have to apply that during the active growth. For example, if you have warm season that's growing actively in summer, you have to apply those herbicides during that summer where it's growing actively, so that the plants itself can take that herbicides down to the root systems, and that herbicide is going to be on the whole system of the plants and kill that eventually. Okay. Similarly, with the winter or cool season crops, if you want to kill the cool season weeds, you have to apply during during spring or fall, so that they can take that herbicides actively into their system, and then whole plants dies. Okay. So here, most of us are familiar with the Roundup herbicides. It's a non-selective herbicides. Anything that touches will get killed by the Roundup because it's a non-selective. So if you have a Bermuda grass or ground ivy and you spray Roundup, you're going to kill your tall fescue or Kentucky bluegrass as well. So you have to plan for reseeding. But Roundup has been so effective. It is actually like a gold standard when it comes to like Bermuda grass control from chemical options, because there are some options for selectively only killing Bermuda grass, but good luck with that. I mean, I have mentioned that in very tiny font on the bottom of the slide, like Fluzapop and trichlopyr. These are some of the chemical options for selective Bermuda grass control, but good luck with that. I mean, Bermuda grass in itself, it spreads from stolons, rhizomes, new seeds. So it's obviously obnoxious weeds, and it's very hard time or challenging to control with those selective herbicides. Your Roundup will be the way to go to kill the Bermuda grass if you really want to have your chemicals be effective. And one of the questions that I get often is, okay, if I kill my Bermuda grass, then my yard will be dead and brown in the summer. So to circumvent that options, one alternative will be to spray glyphosate around early fall, like early September or late August, so that you can kill Bermuda grass as it is growing actively during that time. But then again, you can immediately reseed the dead spots because your ideal seeding time is fall again. So that will be one way to approach Bermuda grass, I think. For the ground ivy, you don't have to do Roundup, but if it is like a huge patch of ground ivy and you want to kill the whole area, then you can go ahead and do Roundup. It will kill the whole ground ivy, and then your turf grass like fescue or bluegrass, and then you have to reseed. But also you can do spot treatments with selective herbicides, and there are quite a few options here. One of the most effective one is a trichlopyr. You can also do MCPP plus dicamba. Those are available for home and users as well on the garden stores under different brand names. So that will be the way to go for ground IP. Again, I want to point out some of the weeds like dandelions and broadleaf plantains. If you have those weeds, perennial problems in a yard, then you can control them using 2,4-D. For the weeds like white clovers and chickweeds, you have to use MCPP. Again, I'm pointing out different products here. It can be intimidating for you guys to know all these products, but I just want to point out that if you want to control clovers or chickweeds, then you cannot spray 2,4-D, so it will not work. So you have to be careful what you're buying, what product is in the label, read the label, know what the chemistry is in there, and what is the target weed that you're looking for. Okay, so not all broadleaf herbicides or selective herbicides are same, but more often than so in the market and the garden centers for the homeowners, the products are available in combinations. So some of the products may, like weed killers, may be available in the form of 2,4-D plus MCPP plus dicamba. Okay, if you have those combinations, then yes, you can get good control for dandelions, clovers, and ground ivy, all of those. But just be sure to read the labels and know what you are spraying in your yard. And this time of the year, we also often get questions about white grubs, and I'm pretty sure all of us have seen these white grubs in our yard. But many people may not realize that those white grubs eventually develop into adults, like these beetles here, Japanese beetles, June beetles, and those kind of beetles. Actually, all the grubs are larvae of different kinds of scarab beetles. The interesting thing about this is they have a very interesting life cycle, and I don't want to go deeper on that. But what happens is, in the midsummer, beetles lay eggs, and those eggs hatches into larvae. In the late summer, they feed the turf, staying below the soil line throughout the summer, and in the early fall and late fall, you can see the most damage there. But as soon as the temperature starts to cool down, now they will overwinter. They will travel below the soil level in deep soil and overwinter there. So these grubs are staying in your yard throughout the winter, but you are not seeing them because they are just overwintering deep below the soil. And as soon as the temperature kicks in and warms up, now they are coming up on the surface, and now you can see all sorts of grubs on your yard. But one thing very positive on that is, if you see a few grubs here and there, there's nothing to worry about. There is a thing called economic thresholds. I mean, how much severe is your is the grubs populations in your yard. So the very easy thing to do is just go out in our yard and do 1 by 1 foot of area, remove the turf, and see below that canopy and monitor for their grubs. If you have, like, on average 5 to 6 grubs per square feet, so that's below the economic threshold. So meaning that you don't have to do anything for that. Like, you don't have to go for the chemical options. All you can do is grow a healthy turf, again, with proper cultural options. So anything above, like, more than 5 or 6 grubs per square feet on average, then now you have to think about and look for these chemical options. But for the grubs, the best way to kill the grubs is in summer with the use of insecticides. There are several insecticide options, but I'm not going to talk today about that. We can talk that in future as we approach more in the season. But as of now, your job here is to monitor the grubs populations and figure out and assess the situation on your yard, and focus more on the cultural options, proper aerations. If you need aerations on your yard, then you can do that in the spring as well, and fall as well. Fertilizations, proper fertilizations, irrigations, and then all those good management practice will eventually help your turf grow more vigorously, improve the vigor, and fight against disease, insect pest, and weeds overall. So that will be all from my side on the lawn here, and I'll go back to Jennifer again.
Okay, thank you, Manoj. Our next question is, what is the difference between dormant oil and neem oil and their purposes and the best time to apply? And Justin Kay is going to answer that question for us.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Get my presentation pulled up here. Okay, that's not it. Sorry, guys. Okay, are you seeing my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, does anybody know what that is? If you want to put it in the chat box, everybody but Tamara can answer this question, but if you have any idea what that image is, go ahead and put it in the chat box, or if you have a guess you want to guess through, go ahead and drop it in there. So horticultural oils, basically we're looking at oils that are primarily to control insects. The first horticultural oils were what we would call dormant oils. They're pretty effective at controlling insects like mites, both adults as well as their eggs, as well as scale insects that can be common problems on fruit crops, fruit trees. And basically that action is through a smothering. So it's really important that there's complete spray coverage with any use of a horticultural oil. You really do have to have total coverage, top and the bottom of leaf surfaces, all the crooks of the branches and all that stuff. You really want to apply this stuff until it's dripping from the fruit tree. The cool thing about horticultural oils is insects cannot develop resistance to them because it's not a chemical mode of action, it's actually a mechanical control of action. There has been sometimes these horticultural oils are marketed for diseases. I think specifically powdery mildew, a lot of them are labeled for, they're not necessarily the best fungicide on their own, but they are labeled for some disease control. So that picture you were looking at was a spiracle, and that is basically, you can see the image of the grasshopper here. There's these holes along the rear of its abdomen. And then on the left-hand side, you see this kind of expanded drawing of a spiracle that leads into the trachea and the tracheole. So basically insects respirate through these holes called spiracles. And that image you saw was a close-up of that spiracle. So basically, you know, we spray this dormant oil and you're essentially suffocating the insects because they're unable to respirate when those spiracles are basically clogged with oil. There's a lot of different names for horticultural oil. So dormant oil you might also hear it called heavy dormant oil. Basically, when it's heavy, it just means it's less well refined. Since the first use of dormant oil, these types of products have been refined a lot more. So instead of a heavy oil that's less well refined like dormant oil, we have now summer oils and all season oils. It used to be these horticultural oils that are petroleum based, they could only be applied in plant dormancy due to phytotoxicity and other plant interactions. But since they've refined them more, some of them can be used all season, depending on the plant and depending on the temperature. But they're all petroleum based. They might be called paraffinic oil or mineral oil, but they're all petroleum based. Most of the time they're plain, they're just the oil, so they can act as a suffocation. Sometimes they're mixed off the shelf with things like pyrethrins. And then a pretty common practice in terms of orchard management would be mixing a dormant oil with a lime sulfur mix as a preventative fungicide application before bud swell and bud break. And we do have a homeowner fruit tree spray schedule, which tells you, what to spray when for the different fruit crops based on the stage of development of that crop, whether it's bud swell, bud break, or different things like that. Just make sure you read the label. There can be a lot of phytotoxicity with these horticultural oils, especially at higher temperatures. So just make sure you read the label. It might say test the oil on a small spot on a sunny day of the plant to make sure that it's not going to cause any phytotoxicity. And phytotoxicity is basically just, the plant having a bad reaction to that application of horticultural oil. So you don't want to kill your plants. Make sure you read that label. Some of the heavier oils are going to be labeled only for dormancy. Some of the other ones can be used for all season or summer application. Like I said, just watch the tables. Pardon me. Read the labels because they usually have tables there that show you the different temperature restrictions. They may or may not be listed as an organic product. Neem oil was also in this question. So Azadirachta indica is the plant that we're talking about. And this neem oil is an extract from the seed of that plant. It is a repellent. It has a bitter taste. It has an acrid smell. It also acts as a suffocating oil, clogging up those spiracles. And it does also have some activity as a preventative fungicide control, although that's not the primary use generally for neem oil. In addition to the suffocating factor, the active chemical in neem oil is azadirachtin. And so that chemical actually acts as a feeding inhibitor and disrupts insect life cycles. So you can actually buy azadirachtin concentrate, for instance, where it's been pulled out of the neem oil and you can mix it into a solution for a tank sprayer or something. That's a pretty common organic insecticide. So that's all I got on oils.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
Oh,
Our next question.
Sorry, I just want to give a quick shout out. We do have a cover crop class this evening, cover crops for vegetable gardens. I'll drop the link in the chat. There's still some time to register until 4 p.m. So anyway, sorry, Jennifer.
That's okay. Thank you. The next question is, why do my cucumbers shrivel and droop during the day and not produce like they used to? And Debbie is going to answer that question.
Yeah, so this is a very common question. We normally get this question when our cucurbits are actually growing in the garden. So you're thinking about this ahead of time. So bravo to you who are asking this question. We actually did this as a snippet. And so Tamara's going to drop into the chat box the actual URL so that you can actually find this particular snippet and watch it in full detail and an explanation. Robert Balick, our colleague over in Jasper County, is the one who actually answered this question for us a couple of years ago. But essentially what it is, it could be poor pollination. So you'll hear about this in the video, or it could be blossom end rot. So it depends upon how far along the fruit might have set. Lots of different things as far as the differences in poor pollination and blossom end rot. So this is our YouTube channel. So if you watch YouTube at all, and all of our stuff is being broadcast on YouTube, it's live right now on YouTube. So you just have to type in YouTube, it'll pop up. And then once you get into the YouTube channel, which I am, because I can see this on the left side, just type in MUIPM, that's Missouri University Integrated Pest Management. And then you can select home horticulture because it'll be listed on that main page of MUIPM. And then you can do a search through all the different snippets. And then you can also see all of our garden hours where we've actually had them in the past. If you missed a week, then by all means, go to our YouTube channel at MUIPM Home Horticulture, and you can watch whatever you missed. But essentially the answer to your question real quick, poor pollination, chances are it's that, or it could be blossom end rot. And when your cucumbers are starting to come up and you're starting to see that, if you have more questions, by all means during the growing season, be sure to let us know and we can talk in more detail specifically about it at that time. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Okay, so the next question is it too late to prune fruit trees? Actually, prune any kind of a tree? That's a common question that comes in this time of the year. The answer is no, it is not too late to prune trees. And you want to make sure you get the pruning done, though, before the trees leaf out. The buds are really starting to swell on a lot of different species of trees. and you need to get out and you need to get it pruned, especially on these nice days we're having this week. You definitely want to get the oak trees pruned first if you're going to prune oak trees. That is because once they start leafing out, they are more susceptible to oak wilt and oak wilt being spread. You do not want to prune oak trees after they have started leafing out. If you miss that opportunity, then you're better off waiting until they are dormant in the fall. And if you have any questions about pruning, and whether you're in the Boot Hill or Southwest Missouri, wherever you're at, if you have questions, please reach out to the horticulture specialist that serves your county. And we have 2 questions in the chat about fruit trees. So I thought I would just go ahead and answer those right now, if I can find them. Okay, it's time to spray fruit trees, but should you spray young trees if they are too young to fruit? So the answer is yes, you should and could spray young fruit trees that were just planted last year. The reason is they are still susceptible to getting peach leaf curl if they're a peach tree, or cedar apple rust or other diseases. So by spraying them with a fungicide, you will prevent them from getting a disease. Now, insecticides, I don't often spray young trees with insecticides, but you can. One reason being is that Japanese beetles are bad in parts of Missouri, and Japanese beetles will eat the leaves of fruit trees. I don't have bad Japanese beetle problems here in Kirksville, Missouri. So that's one reason why I don't necessarily spray insecticides on young fruit trees. But again, you can reach out to the horticulture specialists covering your county and see what they think about that. And then another question in the chat is, can you straighten up a fruit tree in spring when the ground is soft? Last year, the apples were so heavy, it bent the tree. It now has a crutch. The answer is yes. Now is a good time to straighten that tree. I've had to do that here at the extension office. We've had some trees that have bent over, leaned over, not because they were loaded with fruit, but because the ground got so soft that it caused them to do that. So pull that tree up where it's straight, and then you're probably going to have to stake it. We don't recommend leaving the stake on for years, or a long time. Just get it staked and leave it on just long enough so that the tree can, straighten back up. Okay, so that's the answer to those questions. Now, the next topic we're going to do is St. Patrick's Day plants. Tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, and Kathy is going to talk about a St. Patrick's Day plant now.
Thank you, Jennifer. There we go. So this is the time of year that we see this plant often in grocery stores and florists and just about any store really, and it's marketed as the Shamrock plant. Actually, and the plant is associated with St. Patrick's Day and Irish legend, but actually it is in the oxalis or wood sorrel family, and this plant has clover-like leaves and is easy to grow, flowers very well, and so it is a great plant to market as a shamrock plant, or sometimes called the lucky plant. So the leaves come in shades of green, red, or purple. I often see the purple and the green. And the 5 petals of any oxalis plant are 5 petaled flowers. Indoors, if you grow the plant indoors, they do like a cooler temperature. So 75 or below is good. And in the night, 60s is a good temperature for them. If you're going to plant them outside, they need to be in a shady, protected area. They do suffer from hot conditions, though. So they can get leggy. And just wait, though. They will bounce back when the temperature's cool. And you can see from this picture how they add a lot to a container planting mixed with other plants. They can be put in hanging baskets or along borders. And they really, that purple, especially, it's just such a stunning color, and they mix really well with a lot of different plants. And a unique thing about this plant is that it's a reaction to light. So at night or on an overcast day, those leaves will fold up and actually hug the stem of the the plant. And then in the daylight hours, it wakes it up. And as on these two pictures, you can see they're flattened. So it's fun to watch. And or for a horticulturist, it's what we call fun. And they do go dormant, and the leaves die back. And you just once they do that, you clean them up and you quit watering them, put them in a dark location. And for the purple ones, you leave them for about a month, and the green ones 2 or 3 months. So I would check them after 2 months. And when you see signs of the plants coming back, the leaves coming up, just put them back in the bright location, start watering and fertilizing. They are easy to divide, and they're grown from tubers, and you can divide them when they're dormant, and they're just small tubers, and you can just put a few of them in a pot shallowly, and you'll have another plant. These plants can live for years with good care, and they're fun, very attractive inside or out. They don't require much attention. They bloom easily, add beauty and interest indoors and out. So if you do receive one for a gift, or you purchase some, and we often say this, if a plant is wrapped in foil or, the paper or attractive paper, that the pot could be wrapped in, remove that. That is not good for the plant and the roots or the tubers of the plant. So you want to make sure that you don't overwater. Those are two things we often say. If you were going to have a party or, company, and you wanted to leave that foil or paper on, for a day or two, that would be okay. But in the long run, don't leave that paper on. So this has piqued my interest. I want more of these this year, and I bet I'm going to find some. This is a good time of year. I wanted to say too that I have overwintered these outside in the Springfield area, and they're just really pretty outside. But again, it was a very protected area. And that's all I have, Jennifer. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Kathy. There's a question in the chat about the variety of begonia. Do you know, did you take that photo, or do you know what variety of begonia that is?
I did not take that photo, but I believe it's called a hex begonia. But there's, as Dr. Trinkline has said, I don't even know how many varieties there are. So within that hex, I believe it's hex or rex begonia. Does anyone know? There would be a lot of varieties of that as well. You can find them. I've seen them at big box stores, and then of course at nurseries as well.
Yeah, I believe they're Rex begonias with an R.
Rex begonias, okay. Yeah, probably not a hex.
Yeah. I think Dr. Trinkline has said there are lots and lots of different types of or cultivars of begonia.
Yes, he has. But I think it's easy to find. And those two pairings are very nice. That Rex begonia and the Shamrock plant, or the oxalis. It's a nice pairing, as well as almost anything. That spider plant, it was a nice pairing as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kathy. And thank
Yes.
you to all of our presenters today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Debbie.
Yeah, we just want to say thank you very much for joining us this week. We're excited, as always, to share our knowledge, and sometimes we may not have an answer, and so we go research it and we learn something new our own. So educators enjoy learning more, and I don't know about all of my colleagues, but I know that's how I feel about it. So I just want to give you a reminder that our next garden hour is going to be on April 6th. So starting on April 6th, we're going to go weekly. So every week you can join us from noon to 1 p.m. here. Or if you'd like, you can watch us live on YouTube. So however you might like to do that. And then I had mentioned earlier that as we go through the growing season, you've got a question, you can go out to the Integrated Pest Management. So it's ipm.missouri.edu/town halls. Click on the Horticulture Town Hall, and a page will come up like this. It should be familiar since you registered. This one, don't worry about the dates. Those are our old dates there, but just fill out the information. And here's the question. submit it and we will get it, and we will try to answer your questions live for you as we go through with the rest of our town halls. I do want to let you know we had a lot of information prepared for today, just in case we didn't have a lot of questions come in. So I know for sure a couple of topics on the next one. We're going to talk about early spring planting tips. And Donna's going to do some presentation on that. And I guarantee you're going to learn a new tip or two with that one. We've got invasive woody plants. When is the best time to control them? And Robert's going to talk about that. And then Dr. Pong Tien is going to do a presentation on invasive pests. And so when we're talking about that, we're talking about insects and diseases. And there are quite a few invasive insects that are starting to show up in Missouri. And so that's what he's going to do for his presentation. If we've got time, if you guys have questions, we'll answer those first, and then we'll come on to these other questions. But in the meantime, again, on the map is where we are. Feel free to reach out to any one of us. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week. Hopefully you can get outside and enjoy today's weather before that little cold snap comes in that Pat had mentioned, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye now.